Right, so we are back for week 3 of DCL, where we're taking on the Band Chasers. This is a pretty interesting week. It is the last week before mids, and what mids is essentially a 1 week break between week 3 and week 4. It's a 7 week season where you get your only shot to make transactions, and you also just get a little bit of a break. So essentially, even though it's a shorter first half, this is essentially the last game of the first half of the season. And we are once again back playing Sword and Shield against the Band Chasers, who currently are number 1 in the standings. And we're 1-1. The Chrome Cabal is 1-1. I think we're about 4th in the standings, but obviously it can be very, very easily overtaken because it's quite early in the season. So you need to be top 4 to make playoffs. So we're right on the edge. A win against the Band Chasers, the number 1 team, would be monumental. Being 2-1 going into the mid-season is a lot more comfortable than being 1-2. So we really want to make sure that we score this win. Unfortunately, I'm coming into this game with our team already down a game, so we are 0-1 going into these. If you notice, I tend to play my games earlier than most other people, mostly just because of my time zone and my lack of preference for Sunday games. But we're down 0-1. We lost our VGC game first to, I think his name is Michael, who is a VGC Worlds finalist and semi-finalist. So that was definitely like a tough one. And I need to reset the score because if we start this series down 0-2, that's pretty horrible and detrimental. So really necessary for me to win this to give my team a shot at winning this week against a very, very strong team. And we are playing FC. Now, unlike the first 2 games where we are basically playing well-known Sword and Shield Draft League players, this time around, we're actually playing someone who I don't think is as experienced in draft, but is one of the strongest, from what I've heard, Smogon players that you can find in a plethora of tiers, namely being Ubers. As you can see, he even has like a fancy badge to prove it under his avatar. But FC is apparently quite a well-known Smogon player, someone who I wasn't familiar with before, but someone who's going to be a challenge nonetheless. And with the proper, draft support, it's a scary game. And in a way, it's even more scary than playing Skyhorse or Glop, because I can kind of predict what, draft players are going to do. I think FC, I don't know how he's going to prep or think about this game because he doesn't come from that draft background, right? And that can be like an advantage in some circumstances. So I definitely felt the most like, ooh, I don't know how this is going to go going into this game, especially because I think the matchup is quite tough. Coco, Victini, and Dragonite is one of, if not the most popular Sword and Shield core right now. It's just very strong offensively, very strong, and very difficult to take down. Coco and Victini in general are very scary. Coco resist essentially is Stunfisk, which Nidoqueen and Milotic can take quite an advantage of if I'm not clicking the right buttons. Also, Hatterene stops me from clicking Stealth Rock as freely, which helps out Victini and Dragonite on his side of things. And then Victini, I have trouble switching into as well. My fire resist is the Blastoise, right? So that's going to take a lot of damage from Energy Ball or Bolt Strike, or especially Bolt Strike in electric terrain, right? So very scary stuff there. But still, interestingly enough, I do like my team. I really enjoy this team. This is the same team I used week 2. I think Galarian Germanitan plus Blastoise is really strong. It's a really strong combination, right? Because he only has one real banded Darmanitan answer, and that's the Milotic, and that takes 40% from Icicle Crash. And Milotic has to be wary about stopping Shell Smash Blastoise as well. So he can't solely dedicate it to Galarian Germanitan, and that's what I really like about that offensive core. On top of that, the double flying, once again, you might see, yes, there's Tapu Koko, but I can use one to pressure Tapu Koko. I can use like G Moltres to pressure Tapu Koko. for Togekiss to win in the late game. And then Kartana in itself is a big threat. Stunfisk's a nice defensive piece. In terms of what's benched on both sides, this is so unbelievably fucking bizarre. So benched on FC's side is Swoobat, which was never coming, and Scrafty, which I thought was guaranteed. I did not play a single mock that didn't involve Scrafty because I have a Necrozma that I've also benched. For the longest time this week, I toyed around with downright bizarre Necrozma sets because there's functionally no Necrozma set that comfortably and reliably beats Scrafty consistently, especially since Scrafty can be so versatile in terms of how it invests its EVs, how if it's more offensive or defensive or whatever. It's very difficult for Necrozma to break through Scrafty. Plus, if I was to make a Necrozma set that was just dedicated to 1v1ing Scrafty, was that entirely valuable to me? I didn't think so. So I actually ended up benching Scrafty in favor of one of the 6 mons that I have here instead. And it ended up being this team at the end of the day. So at team preview, when I saw that there was no Scrafty, I lost my goddamn mind because Necrozma looks incredible here, right? You set up a Dragon Dance and say your moves are, you know, I mean, just versus this team, Photon Geyser plus, you know, Shadow Claw or Knockoff or whatever, absolutely nukes this team. Photon Geyser goes through multi-scale as well as Marvel Scale. And, you know, I would have had, you know, the Brick Break or whatever for Scrafty, whatever. Point being is, like, Necrozma went crazy against the 6 that he brought, so I was baffled that it didn't show up. I was fully anticipating one of Nidoqueen or Hatterene, not both. So, in a way, these are the best 6 that he could have brought into the 6 that I brought, but it's bizarre to me that there was no Scrafty in the Necrozma matchup. But it ended up working out for him in the team preview side of things. And yeah, so let's just talk about what I ended up bringing. Obviously, some things have to be a little bit secretive, but other things have to be explained a little bit more. So Kartana, once again, I'm not going to explain much to you here. Kartana is basically a attacking set. Again, no surprise, just with, you know, knockoff and other moves that are strong. I'm sure you can kind of infer what those moves are if you look at the matchup. Moltres is our dedicated lead. The idea behind Moltres is that I really want to bait and do as much damage as possible to Tapu Koko. And the way that I do that is by clicking Nasty Plot. I take Thunderbolt, even like modest Thunderbolt, all of the time, and get put into Constabulary range, which between the Nasty Plot and the Berserk boost allow me to click Hyper Beam when I'm +3, which should one-hit KO most offensive forms of Tapu Koko. So that's what I'm going to try to do off lead, is I'm going to try and get Moltres to trade 1-for-1 with Tapu Koko. That's going to free up Togekiss. It's also going to free up Galarian, Darmanitan, and Kartana, because it's going to make Kartana, A, the fastest thing on the field, and B, it's going to make you know, Togekiss a lot happier. It's going to free up Stunfisk defensively. So if I'm able to pull that exchange off, that's going to be really big for me. Blastoise is Shell Smash. I do reveal, I think, all my moves in this game. So we'll see. I'm, you know, Surf, Ice Beam, Shell Smash. And then the 4th move, I do reveal in the game, but I'm going to let you guess what that 4th move is. Because it's a little controversial. No, it's not controversial, but I'm sure if you see the thumbnail, maybe you can think about it. But Galarian Darmanitan is, surprise, surprise, choice banded, absolutely strong demon. It does, before the Flame Orb pops, if Milotic opts to be that set, U-turn is doing like 45% to physically defensive Milotic. It means that it, you know, basically isn't a switch-in. And Milotic can't really do much except hope for a 30% burn in terms of like firing back. I 3-hit KO with Icicle Crash as well. If rocks go up, then that's even better for me. Yeah, Galarian Darmanitan is just a demon. It OHKOs Dragonite through multi-scale. I think it does like 200-something% min through Dragonite's multi-scale, so it's absolutely nuts. It 2-hit KOs Victini with Icicle Crash, and then obviously like OHKOs everything else. Physically defensive Hatterene takes like 90% from Banded Icicle Crash, so a little bit of chip will get it in range. It's just a breaker, really. If I can get it in front of Hatterene or Dragonite or Nidoqueen, I get to click a button and probably claim something. So that's what we're going to be trying to do with Galarian Darmanitan. Just absolutely shredded team. Togekiss is very interesting. We are a somewhat bulky, somewhat offensive Togekiss, kind of like some speed, a good deal of special attack, and then max HP. And we are running a dual stab. We are running Roost. It is basically just a tanky attacker Togekiss. And then Stunfisk is Stealth Rock, and then some other support options. It's a dedicated Coco check. So let's see how this game goes. So FC is going to opt to lead with Milotic here. Now this kind of echoes the game that we saw against Glop, where the bulky water was led. And it actually gives me a little bit of insight into like how people are prepping against this team. Like clearly lead Galarian Darmanitan is so scary into opposing teams that it's interesting to see a lot of like forced bulky water leads. It makes a lot more sense to me now, which is quite interesting. So lead Milotic is very interesting. Galarian Moltres is in. If Milotic has Toxic, I can kind of see it coming off here, but also simultaneously, Milotic has so much pressure to deal with both Stoice and Galarian Darmanitan, and even Togekiss to some extent, and a pressure Stunfisk, that taking any form of chip here is not good for it. So even if it stays in, I'm going to go for a Nasty Plot and then start attacking it. And if it switches out, then that's even better for me. So let's see. Goes Coco like I completely expect, and I go for the Nasty Plot. So this is wonderful for me. Obviously, I'm in a situation where he thinks he's just, made an effective switch in, which, on paper he has, but he doesn't know that I'm Hyper Beam on my Galarian Moltres. So I am going to go for Hyper Beam. Now, this is a very strange situation, right? Because I thought I was going to get T-Bolted or Dazzling Gleamed and get put into Berserk range. So if that would have happened, then I would have killed with Hyper Beam. However, he goes for Toxic instead, and he misses. Now, the miss, while it might seem unfortunate, actually kind of sucks for me. Because if he had Toxic to me, and then he goes for T-Bolt this next turn, on my recharge turn, I get put into Custap range, and he doesn't suspect Custap. So in a way, I kind of wish that Toxic landed, funny enough. But that's absolutely okay. He's in range of Fire Wrath now, which is like great. And, he's going to go for T-Bolt here. That's absolutely fine. Get the special attack boost. I'm going to recharge. And now he doesn't know. I'm going to go for Endure. Get the Custap Berry boost. And obviously the annoying situation about this, the full para obviously is unfortunate. But we'll see if I get, fully para this turn. The unfortunate thing about this is if the Toxic landed, I would have been able to pop the Custap without using Endure, which means the Coco probably would have been baited to stay in, which, would have been nice. But it ended up being the case that I have to use Endure, which is telegraphing Custap, which means this Coco is very likely going to switch out here, which it ends up doing. So it ends up switching out into Dragonite. Sorry, my face is so itchy right now. He ends up switching into Dragonite, and I go into my Togekiss. He goes for Extreme Speed. That does 42% to a Togekiss. Now, Togekiss is very bulky, so 42% actually reveals that this Dragonite is Choice Banded. That's actually very valuable information because it means that that Fire Route that Galarian Moltres just damaged Dragonite with did, a ton of damage. And obviously, that's damage that's unrecoverable if this Dragonite is Choice Banned. So one stopgap to Gartana being multi-scale Dragonite is now, forever broken unless, somehow Dragonite gets back to full, but I don't see how that's possible to happen unless it's just Hatterene get Healing Wish. I'm not sure. Either way, breaking multi-scale is absolutely massive. It sets up a lot of my other mons quite effectively. So we see Extreme Speed here pop off, and then he goes back into Tapu Koko as I go for Roost. And now I am back at full, and this Coco is in a very interesting spot, right? This Coco is threatening my Togekiss, but let's think about this here, right? So Coco is going to get its, leftovers back. Coco is in range of Dazzling Gleam right now, and in my mind, Coco can do a few things. Coco can Toxic here, expecting Stunfisk to come in, or it can Roost. Also expecting Stunfisk to come in, but like covering a different potential switch as well. I don't expect T-Bolt to come off here because I think the obvious telegraphed switch is Stunfisk, and to me, you just don't do that, right? You don't T-Bolt when Stunfisk is so obviously the Mon reserved and back for Koko. Because what Psycho would leave Togekiss in on a Tapu Koko? Well, in my mind, if I think the two viable plays are Toxic and Roost, and Dazzling Gleam is going to kind of just like reset this turn, right? So Koko might go for Roost, and then I might go for D-Gleam, and it's going to do, you know, half or maybe like 45%. Yeah, it's not really going to be a favorable turn for me, but also simultaneously, I'm taking the risk that he's going to click any other button. If he Toxics me, if he T-Bolts me, I kill this Koko here with Dazzling Gleam, and that is such a high value for me. So I want to punish him making any other play besides Roost. I think he very well could make a play besides Roost, but if he Roosts and I click Dazzling Gleam, there's really no difference besides maybe Koko being like 15% healthier. And to me, I want to take the opportunity I best can to eliminate this Koko. So I'm going to do that right here, right now. I'm going to click Dazzling Gleam, and he is going to Toxic, expecting the incoming Stunfisk. I click Dazzling Gleam, and Koko is dead. So even though the Galarian Moltres didn't work perfectly, it was a very sort of like bizarre interaction where the Toxic missed, which actually kind of sucked for me, and then I had to click Endure, and then he knew that like it was Custap, so he was able to switch out. Even though that whole situation was a little weird, I was able to eliminate the Koko early like was planned, and this is going to be really huge for Kartana. Obviously, like look at knockoff. There's no knockoff resist, which is absolutely insane. It's going to be absolutely massive for Togekiss clicking Air Slash now. Again, now there's no Air Slash resist. And it's going to be really nice for just, you know, my faster things being Galarian Darmanitan and Kartana are no longer outpaced by anything. Obviously, Galarian Darmanitan is outpaced by Victini, but I still have, you know, some of my better answers to Victini still around, which is amazing. So Nidoqueen comes in, very obvious telegraph switch. In my mind here, he can do one of two things. He can just attack me with Sludge Wave, but more importantly, he could try and get Hazard up, whether that's T-Spikes or Rocks. I'm not sure. I think T-Spikes are pretty valid into my team here, albeit, you know, it only affects like 3 Mons, but it could be T-Spikes, who knows? But I think what's more likely is Stealth Rock. And now, why is Stealth Rock more likely than him just attacking me? Well, I have this Galarian Moltres in the back that's a very, very easy sack that's paralyzed, right? So in his mind, he can get a 2-for-1 deal by clicking Rocks on the Moltres sack and then killing Moltres. I think I want to save this sack for later. I'm so confident that Rocks are coming off here that I'm just going to go straight into my Blastoise. I'm just going to go right into my Blastoise and click Shell Smash. And he goes into Milotic, and I'm going to go for Shell Smash. Now, unfortunately, Blastoise doesn't really have any moves to hit Milotic. It doesn't get grass coverage. It doesn't get like Grass Knot, sadly. But it does get Thunderbolt. And I'm going to click Thunderbolt here, aka Terrain Pulse, and use the Koko's electric terrain against it to KO the Milotic. Now, that was a very bold risk that I took because it's possible that he could think of something like that and make a switch out. But I figured this was the prime opportunity for me to do so. The Koko was down early, which means that like I needed to use the terrain while I had the opportunity to do it. If he didn't fall for it, then that was absolutely fine because his only valid play on this turn anyway is to go Milotic. And then if he truly thinks that I'm Terrain Pulse, he has to like go into Nidoqueen and risk taking like damage. If I'm not Terrain Pulse, then that's like a ton of damage that he's taking just by switching around. And then, you know, if he goes back to Milotic after the terrain is gone, I could start just Shell Smashing more and more and more to start dealing some big damage. So I imagine he didn't even think of Terrain Pulse, but even if he had, I think this was still the optimal play because it gets the most usage out of Blastoise because he still has to kind of flail around to figure out how to beat the Blastoise and get Milotic back in, which means Milotic is taking more damage. I'm not particularly worried about, you know, switching into Milotic. I have, you know, the free sack and Moltres. I have Togekiss, which can air slash flinch it down. I even have Kartana, which can, boldly switch in against it if I'm expecting it to click Haze or Recover or something like that, and then deal a ton of pressure. If I can get Kartana in against Milotic, that's huge. But it doesn't end up being that way. It ends up being that I catch him off guard with the Terrain Pulse, which is massive. So we are up in a very, very, very dominant fashion right now. Hatterene comes in. I'm just going to click Surf. It's going to do 85%. This reveals that it's max HP Hatterene, but that's it. And he's going to go for Trick Room. So Trick Room comes off here. I run the calc, and most of the time, and like very, very much most of the time, I should live any hit from this Hatterene, even if it is Life Orb, Modest, Psychic. The only hit that I guarantee don't live is something like a Life Orb, Giga Drain, or Energy Ball, or whatever. And I don't believe that it's going to have that move, because I think that it wants to be Fire move, it wants to be Psychic move, and it wants to be Fairy move, right? So Fire for Kartana, Fairy for Moltres, then Psychic for everything else. So I don't think it's going to be Grass moves. I feel very confident staying in and just claiming the KO here, even if it means that Blastoise has to take all the damage. Now, I actually think in hindsight, this is probably a misplay, because if you look at the rest of the team, Dragonite, or Blastoise rather, is like my Victini resist. So by letting Blastoise take damage this turn, I'm actually opening myself up to a potential Victini loss, depending on what the Victini set is. Now, obviously, I do have Stunfisk that has means to at least deal with Victini in some ways, but you never know, right? And I think preserving Blastoise and using, the free sack that I have to A, stall at a turn of Trick Room, and B, then I can go into Stunfisk and just kind of like, I think my Stunfisk will beat a 15% Hatterene. I think that was probably the better play. But I don't think this play was bad, given that my team exists. Like, my team does have other ways around Victini. It's just that Blastoise was the most reliable way around Victini. So letting it go down against the Hatterene, which can probably be taken down by a different member of my team, probably not the smartest move, but not, game ending by any means either. So I'm just going to let Hatterene give me that damage, and he's going to go Victini. He's going to pick me off with V-Create, obviously. Now, I could have chosen to sack Moltres and deny Victini the drops, or I could have chosen to allow Victini to get the drops, and I think I want to allow Victini to get the drops because I prefer having to force him to deal with the defense drops rather than the speed drop, because I could just bring Stunfisk in here, right, and threaten, and he's going to have to switch. Now, I go for Rocks here. Now, why do I go for Rocks? So, obviously, like, he could stay in and V-Create again. That's very possible. But I think he wants to keep this around, depending on what it is, right? If it's Choice Scarf, especially. Why do I go for Earth Power? Why do I go for Rocks instead of like a Ground type move? I go for Rocks essentially because I want this Dragonite in range of Kartana hit, guaranteed. And I want this Victini. I want to know whether it's Boots or not. That's really important to me, so that I know if it's Choice Scarf or Choice Band, or if it's just Boots. I think that's going to be important knowledge. And ultimately speaking, I think no matter what was to happen this turn, I was sacking Gmolt this next turn to finish the last turn of Trick Room. And now I get to go into Galarian Japanitan in front of the Nidoqueen, which is massive. He has to switch, or lose the Nidoqueen. Obviously, that's the choice that he faces. He elects to lose the Nidoqueen. It's going to do about 8 million damage. I'm pretty sure that calc was like 600% to the Nidoqueen, which is absolutely fucking hilarious. And then, and again, I'm sure he's banded Galarian Japanitan here. And it ends up being revealed, like, I'm just going to sack this and try and win with Kartana. Like, that's kind of my plan, especially since if he has to V-Create me to kill me, then I can just go into Kartana, click Knockoff twice and win the game. But actually, he is slower than me. And Ice Cold Crush does 48%, which reveals this Victini to be, like, very bulky. Like very bulky, because against no bulk, I think Ice Cold Crash does like 60-something to Victini. So this is at the very least max HP Victini, which is quite interesting. And it definitely doesn't have very much speed, so it could have been like trying to like work with Trick Room with Hatterene, I'm not sure. But I go for Ice Cold Crash, just do as much damage as possible. It doesn't pick off the KO. It does much less than I expected to. And I end up getting the flinch. But at this point, the game is over, right? Because if Victini kills me that turn anyway, I can just go Kartana and clean up with knockoff. So this ended up just saving me differential and giving Galarian to Banatan some kills, which I'm absolutely okay with. As you can see, Dragonite's going to go for a little Hail Mary E-Speed, doesn't end up picking off the KO, and I end up killing it with High School Crash, allowing me to win the third week of DCL. Very, very good game to FC. It was pretty cool. It's a pretty cool facet of this tournament that not only do I get to play very, very good draft players, but you get some Smogon people who are well-known Smogon people who are playing in the draft metagame as well. So this was definitely a very scary matchup and a crazy game of offense. It was cool that like all my tech showed up, like the Nasty Plot Hyper Beam Moltres damaging the Coco with Custep Berry. That's just classic for me. And then the Terrain Pulse Blastoise, absolutely massive. So some cool things that I got to show off this game. And despite this, we got clobbered this week. So we lost to Band Chasers, 2 wins to 6 losses, sadly. So we end up going into mids with only 1 win and 2 losses. The perk to this being that the standings shook up in such a way that essentially places 4 through 8 all have the same amount of points. So we didn't necessarily like get jumped up by anybody, but the standings got way closer. And it means we have to lock down for the second half of the season or we are not making playoffs. We have to do very well in the next half of the season. My season's going great. I'm 3-0, but it's a team league, right? So we got to make sure that we are doing as best that we can to make playoffs and get everyone in the winning column for their games. So yeah, that's my week 3. There's going to be no video from me next week for DCL because it's mids. Perhaps we're going to start looking at potential trades for my 3rd SS team that I haven't used yet this season. So obviously there's this one, which is the G-Darm Blastoise one that I've been using the past 2 weeks. And then there's the more balancey type one that's like the Landorus Therian Uxie one with like Keldeo Weavile offense. And then we have another one that kind of has like some weird guys like Mamoswine and like Gengar, like things that are not very good, frankly. So we're going to try and kind of completely renovate that team, and hopefully that means that you'll be able to see a cool 3rd team on the channel as well, because I definitely enjoy in these team tours using multiple types of teams. So we'll see if we can construct it into something that is fun and usable. Anyway, that's for later to talk about, but this was the game against FC. I really appreciate all the love that people have been giving me on the DCL games. Obviously, this is a bit of a pivot from what y'all are used to seeing, but hopefully you enjoy seeing me compete on the big stage like this. Yeah, really cool. All right, see you all next week. Bye-bye. Or not next week, in 2 weeks. All right, bye-bye.